Hi, everyone. Thanks for sticking with me. So, we are on our next lesson in our statistics unit, which is about measures of central tendency. So, we've done a lot of introducing you to what statistics is all about and how we survey people and how we can make predictions. But now, what we're going to move into is if you were to actually collect data, what could you do with it? What kinds of things do statisticians actually look for in their data? And so that's where this whole lesson on measures of central tendency comes in. Now, you probably have heard of the measures of central tendency before. You might just be forgetting the name. So we're going to define that right now. So it's the mean, the median, or mode of a set of data. And I'm going to make a note here too. One of the things you probably talked about in sixth grade is the range. And the range is often used as well. So even though it's not considered one of the measures of central tendency, we usually do talk about it as being part of that. Okay, so if you remember from last year, and we've actually done this when we were finding out your percent error. I don't know if you guys remember the lesson about guessing the different celebrities' ages, and you were finding out who had the lowest average percent error. So you've done this before. The mean is the same as an average. Okay, so to find an average, we add all of our data values, and then we divide that total by the number that we've added. Okay, so if you don't have a calculator on you right now, you might want to pause the video and go grab one, because we're going to want to add up some numbers in there versus by hand. Okay, so we're going to do just a couple examples, because like I said, you've probably seen this many times before. So example 1, in math class, you've taken 4 quizzes. Your grades so far are 80, 90, 92, and 78. Find your quiz average. Okay, so the first thing you guys are going to want to do is actually add those 4 scores. So 80 plus 90 plus 92 plus 78. And when you do that, you should be getting a total of 340. Okay, so that's step 1 to figuring out your average. Step 2 is to take that total and divide by the number of numbers you added. So in this case, I was adding 4 scores, so I'm going to divide by 4, and I'm going to get that the quiz average is an 85. Okay, number 2, find the mean of this set of data that shows the number of students in 3 grades at a middle school. So there are 315 6th graders, 374 7th graders, and 328 8th graders. So to find the mean, let's add up 315, 374, and 328. And when you're done, you should have gotten 1,017. Step 2 is to divide by how many numbers we added, which is 3. And after you divide by 3, you should get 339 is your mean or your average. Okay, one more example here. The table shows the number of books that students read in the last 3 months. So we can see from the table, Scott read 7, Dorothy read 12, and so on. What is the mean number of books read by the students? So this is the same process. We just are getting our numbers from a table now. Okay, so we're going to add 7 plus 12 plus 5 plus 12 plus 4. And you should be getting that the total number of books read for all of those students was 40. And then step 2 is to divide by how many numbers we added up, which in this case is 5. And so the average number of books read is 8. Okay, so that's average or mean. The next thing we're going to talk about is mode. So the mode of a set of numbers is the number or numbers, I'm going to put S in parentheses here because it could be more than one mode, that appear the most often in a set of data. Okay, one thing I'm going to have you make a note of here is that if there is no mode, we have to write no mode. We would never put 0 because 0 is a number and 0 could be the mode. So if there is no mode, we write no mode. Okay, and like I said before, we could have more than one number that is the mode. So you don't need to know this vocabulary, but if there's 2 modes, we call that bimodal. There's 3 modes, we call it trimodal, and so on. Okay, so first example, what is the mode? So take a second looking through all of that data. Which number appears the most? So it looks like I have 3 4s. I was looking at the 2s and the 10s, but there's only 2 of those. So it looks like 4 is our mode. That's the number that shows up the most. All right, turn the page. Same thing here. What is the mode? So it looks like we have 1.4 showing up 3 times. And I also see 8 is showing up 3 times. So it looks like for this one we have 2 modes, 1.4 and 8. Okay, number 3, the table shows the number of goals made by the top scorers in the after-school lacrosse league at Tom's school. What is the mode of the goal data? Okay, so in the table we can see Greg made 4 goals, Doug made 3 goals, and so on. And so the mode means what number of goals shows up the most often. Okay, so I think it looks like 4 seems to be the most common number of goals scored. So we're going to say 4 is our mode. Okay, number 4, the table shows test grades of a 6th grade science class. What is the mode of the grades on the science test? Okay, so looking at the table, we can see that 4 students received a grade of 50, 2 students received a grade of 60, 7 got a 70, and so on. And so if you think about this as a list of grades, and I'm not going to write all of this out, but just to kind of give you an idea. So if I list out all the grades in the class, I would have 4 50s, 2 60s, and so on. So if you think about it like that, what grade shows up the most in the class? It would be a 70 because 7 kids got that. So 70 was the most common grade, and so that is our mode. Okay, last one about mode. Half of Diane's class received an 80 on the first health quiz. A quarter of the class received a 70, and a quarter received a 90. What is the mode of the class score? So similarly to the last one, we're looking at what was the most common score on that quiz. Well, if half of the class received an 80 and the other scores were a quarter of the class, 1/2 is more than 1/4, and so the mode would be 80. Okay, moving on. Median is next. So the median is basically you have all your numbers in order and you find the middle data point. Okay, so when a set of numbers is ordered from least to greatest, this is really important. Sometimes people forget that they have to put the numbers in order. You can't find the middle until they're in order. So once it's ordered from least to greatest, the middle number is the median. Okay, so this is pretty easy, but the most tedious part is putting the numbers in order. My suggestion would be, as you are listing out your numbers in order, cross them off as you go, because you're less likely to skip something then. Okay, so for example, I know 32 is the smallest in my list. I'm going to cross it off and keep going. So I'm going to let you guys do that. I'll do it up here. Okay, so it looks like I have all of my numbers in order. So now that we have them all from least to greatest, what we're going to do is we need to find the middle number in our list. So to do this, we cross off from the end. So 32, I cross off with 54. 38, I cross off with 52. Now, I am ending up with two numbers in the middle. So anytime you have an even number of numbers in your list, you're going to end up with two numbers in the middle. Well, we can't have a median of two numbers. So what we do is we find the middle of those two numbers. And to do that, you just are finding the average. Okay, so we've talked about average. I'm going to add the 48 plus the 40 and get 88. And because I added two numbers, I'm dividing that by 2. And so that I get the median is 44. Now, some of you might have realized just from looking at that the middle of 48 and 40 is 44. And that's fine. But sometimes if it's not as clear, you have to have that backup tool to find the average. Okay, so let's do the same thing with number 2. So we're going to put all these numbers in order. We're going to cross off as we go. Okay, so there's all of my numbers. To get the middle, I cross off from each end. And since there were an odd number of data values, I do end up having one number in the middle. So my median here is 5. All right, turn the page. Number 3. The following table shows the weights of Johnny's friends. What is the median weight of Johnny's friends? Okay, so basically the same thing. We just have to put them in order, and I'm going to make a list to do that. Now these must be elementary kids because these weights are pretty low. Second graders or something, third graders. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and make my list. You can do it and we'll compare. Okay, let's go ahead and find the middle. We have another odd number of data points, so there is exactly one in the middle. And so the median weight is 66. Okay, one more for median. The table below shows the weekly high temperatures for June. What was the median high temperature? All right, so again, I'm going to start by putting these in order. Okay, and we're going to cross off from the ends. We have another odd number of data values, so 1 is left in the middle, 90 degrees. Okay, so the last one we need to talk about is the range. So the range is basically the difference between the largest and the smallest numbers in the set. Difference between the largest and the smallest numbers in the set. The reason we find the range is because it tells us how spread out our data is. So it tells us how spread out the values of a data set are. So what I mean by that is if you get a really big range, that means that your data values are very inconsistent or very spread out. So for example, if I asked you the ages of all your cousins, okay, and I know this is true in my family. So I have some cousins who are, 2 years old, and then I have some cousins who are in their 40s. And so the range for the ages of my cousins is very big. And so what that means is that the ages of the cousins in my family are very spread out. Okay, now if someone else has cousins all around the same age and you've got a range that was very small, that just means everybody's close in age. So that's the purpose of finding the range of a set of data. Okay, so in number 1, we have to figure out what the largest and the smallest numbers are in this set of numbers. Okay, so I think it looks like 92 is my biggest number. And it looks like 14 is my smallest. So if I subtract those two numbers, I'm going to get a range of 78. Okay, number 2, the students at the Claridge School voted on their next field trip. The results were shown in a table. What was the range of the number of votes? Okay, so we are looking for which type of trip got the most votes. It looks like the TV studio, 97 students. And we're going to subtract the type of trip that got the least number of votes, which is the art museum, minus 38. And so the range of our data is 59. Okay, so those are all the different measures of central tendency plus the range. The last thing we're going to talk about today is when to use which thing. When to use the mean versus the median versus the mode versus the range. And so that's what this whole back page is about. So if you look at number 1, it says Tyler recorded his math quiz scores for the first marking period. His teacher says that he can use the mean, the median, or the mode for his final grade. Which should he choose to obtain the highest grade? Okay, it's a pretty nice teacher to let him choose which measure of central tendency he wants to use. So what we want to do is we want to figure out what each one is and then select the one that's the highest. So over here on the side, I'm going to list out my 3 measures of central tendency. Remember, range really is not included unless they specifically say to use it. So, okay, so for the mean, I need to add up all of these numbers. I'm going to actually let you guys take a second. I'm going to, if you want to pause the video, let's see what you end up getting for the mean. Okay, so based on my calculations, I'm getting 85 for the mean. For the median, it looks like all of my numbers are already in order, so that's pretty nice. I'm actually just going to go like this and cross off from my list that's here. And because there's an even number of data values, there are 2 left in the middle. So remember, if that happens, you find the average of the 2, or the middle of those 2. Okay, so you would add 84 plus 88, divide by 2. Some of you know just by looking at it, the middle of those 2 numbers is 86. Okay, so either way, that is our median. And then the mode, the one that shows up the most often, is 84. We've got 2 84s there. Okay, so based on our 3 measures of central tendency, which should Tyler use for his grade? I'm thinking the median. Median is going to give him the highest grade. 86 versus 85 and 84. All right, number 2, the high temperatures for the first week of school were 84, 87, 89, and so on. Which measure of central tendency would best show that it was very hot during the first week of school? All right, so we're trying to prove to somebody that that first week of school was brutal, and I want to say it was because of the mean, the median, or the mode. So again, we're going to go through, and we're going to find each of these. Okay, and if I'm trying to convince someone how hot it was, I want to pick the one that gives me the highest temperature. Okay, so you guys right now, you're going to add 84 plus 87 plus 89 and so on. We're going to add all these numbers up. And once you get a total, you're going to divide by 7. And if you got 84.7, you did that correctly. Okay, to find the median, it looks like I do not have these numbers in order. So I'm going to make a list here. 80. Cross them off as you go. All right, so there's my list of temperatures in order. We're going to cross off from the ends. We have 1 in the middle, 84. Okay, and then the mode. Which one shows up the most often? It looks like that would be 89. All right, so in order to prove how hot it was during the first week of school, the one I'm going to want to use is the mode, because that is the highest temperature I get from the 3 measures of central tendency. Okay, number 3, Gina's mathematics test scores for the first half of the year are, all of these scores here, find the mean, median, and mode. If Gina wants to brag about her score, which measure of central tendency would she use? If her teacher wants to compute her grade, which measure of central tendency would the teacher use? Okay, so we're going to go through and find all 3 again, and then we'll talk about the answers for each of those questions. Okay, so I'm going to give you a minute. We're going to add all those scores up. And once you have them added, you're dividing by 8 because there are 8 total scores. And it looks like for the mean, if you got 85.75, you have that correct. All right, for the median, we need to put all of these in order. They didn't do that for us. Take a second. Okay. Once you have an order, cross off from the ends. And we have 2 left in the middle. So again, you could add 91 plus 93, divide by 2, or, what's between 91 and 93? 92. And then for the mode, so the one that shows up the most often, I think they all show up 1 time. So in this case, there is no mode. Okay, so let's talk. If Gina has the choice to brag about her score using either the mean or the median, we obviously wouldn't use the mode, she's going to choose the median, right, because that gives her a 92 versus an 85.75. So we're going to say Gina would use the median. To brag about her score. But what would the teacher use? Well, teachers typically use the average to figure out a student's grade. So, for example, in your grades, all of your quizzes get averaged together and go in as a single quiz grade that is worth 30% of your final grade. All of your tests are averaged together to give you 50% of your total grade. And then all of your graded assignments, so classwork assignments, weekly reviews, any projects, those are averaged together and they go in as 20% of your overall grade. So I absolutely do use the mean, and I think a lot of teachers do. It's kind of just how Infinite Campus is set up for us too. So her teacher would use the mean. Okay, we're almost there, guys. So for number 4, the manager of Foot Locker keeps a record of the sizes of each athletic shoe sold. Which number is probably the most useful? The mean, median, or mode, and explain. Okay, so if we think about, let's pretend we own a shoe store, okay, Foot Locker, and you're the manager and you're trying to figure out which size shoe is best to keep in stock. Okay, it's most useful. So let's say you keep records of any customer that comes in and you write down their shoe size. And you're going to look for the mean, the median, and the mode of all of those shoe sizes that were bought. What makes sense to make sure that you're keeping in stock? Okay, so in my mind, I automatically think the mode, because whatever shoe size is selling the most makes sense to keep in stock, right? If I'm looking for the average, that doesn't really help me much as far as like what shoes I need to keep in stock. Same thing with the median, doesn't really matter to me. What matters to me is what's flying off the shelves the fastest, and that would be the mode. Okay, so I'm going to say mode because it shows which shoe size is purchased the most. Okay, so just to kind of rephrase that, there might be some women who wear a size 11 sneaker, right? And some women who wear a size 5 sneaker. But I would say the most common shoe sizes might be closer to 8 or 9 or 7. So just something to think about, if you ever own your own business. It's good data to keep to see what kind of things you should keep in stock. Okay, last part. So we're going to decide out of mean, median, and mode, which measure of central tendency would we use to find each of the following. Okay, so the student who has the largest number of absences, which measure of central tendency makes sense to use here? So if I keep a list of students that are absent every day, I'm looking for the student that shows up the most often because that means that they were out the most. So that would be the mode. The ages of the students in our class. So typically everybody's pretty close to the same age, right? Off by maybe a year or two here or there. And so it seems to make the most sense to find the average of the ages or the mean. The most popular Nintendo Wii game sold at Best Buy. Okay, so as soon as you see most popular, that's going to be the mode, kind of like the shoe size thing, right? Which game is flying off the shelves the most? And the last one, the typical selling price of a house on your street. So this is actually one that I would like to talk about a little bit further because a lot of times in your data, you will find that your data is pretty similar, right? But let's just say there is a house on your street that sells for way below what the rest of the houses sell for or way above. Okay, so let's just pretend most of the houses on your street sell for $250,000. Let's just say that's like the average home price. But then there's this house on the corner of your street and it's worth, let's say, $600,000. Okay, so it's way more expensive than the other houses on your street. So what's going to happen is if you find the average or the mean of those home prices, because of that one house that is so much more expensive than the others, your average is going to be much higher because of that one house. So we say that your average is being skewed higher, okay, because I'm adding in something that is much higher than the rest. Same thing if there was a house that was selling for $100,000 on the street where all the other houses were worth $250,000. Your average would be much lower because of that house that is worth much less. Okay, so what I'm trying to explain is that if there is a number in your data set that is way off from the other ones, the best measure of central tendency to use is the median. Okay, so those houses that I was talking about, the really expensive one or the really inexpensive one, those are called outliers. Okay, an outlier is something that doesn't fit the rest of the data. And so your average is affected by the outliers. Okay, it affects what your average is. But if you use the median is not affected by those outliers. So it's better if you have something with a data point that's way off from the others, it's better to use the median. Okay, so going back to this, the typical selling price of a house on your street, it just depends. I'm going to write median here, and I'm just going to make a note if there are any outliers. Okay, that's why I'm choosing to do the median. If everybody on the street is typically around the same value for their home, then the mean is fine. But it's a good conversation and something to think about. Okay? All right, thanks for sticking with me, guys. Look for the next lesson to come soon.